They say you can tell everything about a person by who shows up when you're at your worst. That night, I learned everything I needed to know about my husband. I came to in room 508 of St. James Medical Center, the air thick with antiseptic and betrayal. My head was pounding, a deep, nauseating throb behind my right eye, as if someone had drilled into my skull and forgot to patch it up. There was a monitor beeping steadily beside me, and a nurse adjusting my four without looking me in the eye. But it wasn't the pain or the nausea that made my stomach clench. It was the fact that Nathan wasn't there. I turned my head slowly, every motion dragging a fresh wave of dizziness through my brain. The other chair in the room was empty. No flowers. No overnight bag. No familiar coat slung over the back. Just sterile silence. That's when the nurse glanced down at me and gave a tight smile. "You're awake. I'll go let the doctor know." She hesitated, then added, "Someone left something for you." She nodded to the bedside table. There was a red envelope, thick and sealed with a single line of ink across the front. Aubrey, my name, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. The nurse lingered a moment longer. "She said to give it to you if he didn't show up." I stared at her. She? But she was already gone. Everything in me wanted to pretend it wasn't important. Just some hospital clerical mix-up. Some random message. But I knew better. Deep down, I'd known something was off for a long time. This just made it real. 3 nights earlier, we'd been celebrating our 6th wedding anniversary. Or rather, I was celebrating. Nathan had arrived late, blaming traffic, and spent half the dinner texting under the table. When the waitress brought out the wine I'd pre-ordered, he barely glanced up. "You're quiet tonight," I'd said, watching him scroll through his phone. "Work stuff," he muttered. "Sorry. I didn't push. I'd stopped pushing a while ago." The last time I brought up feeling neglected, he accused me of being too emotional, too demanding, too sensitive. God, I hate that word. Sensitive. It's the word men use to shame women for noticing the temperature drop in their own marriages. But 3 nights later, as I lay on the garage floor, blood pooling under my right ear, I didn't feel sensitive, I felt like I was dying. It started with a headache that had been coming and going for weeks, but that night it hit like a hammer. I was setting the table for a small dinner I'd planned, rosemary chicken, wine, candles, the kind of thing you do when you're trying to remind someone you still care, even if they don't. 1 minute I was fine. The next, the world tilted. I grabbed the wall, but my legs buckled. I collapsed, right there on the concrete. The pain in my head was white-hot and screaming. My vision split in 2, then 4, then nothing made sense. I couldn't get to my phone, it was in the kitchen. But my Apple Watch was on my wrist. My hands fumbled over the buttons like they were made of stone. I remember the 911 operator's voice, sharp, distant, underwater. "Can you confirm your address, ma'am?" I slurred it out. Barely audible. Barely conscious. Then came the kicker. As I lay half-conscious on the cold floor, I saw Nathan jog past the open garage door. Jogging. AirPods in. Shirtless. Focused. He didn't even glance down. Didn't hear me call out. Or maybe he did and chose not to stop. He didn't look back. The next thing I remember is the ER. Bright white lights, chaos, beeping machines. Doctors rushing. Someone shouting, "We need to prep her for surgery now." Appendix? No. Seizure? No. Tumor? Wrong. Aneurysm. Cerebral aneurysm rupture. A ticking bomb in my brain had finally exploded. I was conscious long enough to give them Nathan's number. "My husband," I whispered, lips cracked, the inside of my mouth dry as ash. They called. I heard them call. And then my phone buzzed on the tray beside me. One new message. Business pitch ran long. "Can't make it. Hope the doctors are good. Let me know when you're out." 10 words. That's all. No, are you okay? No, I'm on my way. No, hang in there, I love you. Just 10 antiseptic words. The tears started silently, tracking down my temples as they wheeled me into surgery. A nurse squeezed my hand, whispering, "He'll be there when you wake up, honey." But I already knew better. Now, lying in the dim light of room 508, I reached for the envelope with shaking hands. The motion made my stitches ache, and I gritted my teeth. Whatever was in there couldn't hurt more than what I already knew. The envelope tore open with a slow rip. Inside, a photograph, a medical bill, and a letter. The photo was old, slightly faded. A man and a woman, dressed in wedding attire. He wore a dark gray tuxedo, his smile unmistakable. Nathan. Younger, maybe 5 years. His arm wrapped tightly around a woman in white. She was stunning, shoulder-length brunette hair, graceful posture, and something familiar in her eyes. It wasn't me. Her dress wasn't mine. But the ring on her hand? Almost identical. I felt the air drain from the room. My vision blurred. I wasn't sure if it was from pain or rage. The medical bill was next. I scanned it instinctively. Not my name. Not my hospital. Patient, Lillian Monroe. Date of service, 4 years ago. Facility, Brightwell Neurological Center. Total charges, $432,000. Status, paid in full. The last page was a letter. Neatly folded. My name printed at the top in that same unfamiliar handwriting. Dear Aubrey. You don't know me, but I know you. I was Nathan's wife before you. My stomach flipped. If you're reading this, it means he's done it again. The room began to spin. He's done it again. Again. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't emotional distance. This was a pattern. A system. A way of life. A calculated method of discarding women when they became inconvenient. The nurse returned quietly. Checked my vitals. I didn't speak. Because what do you say when the man you trusted with your life, twice, once at the altar, once on the garage floor, was already planning for your death? I read the first line again. I was Nathan's wife before you. My hands trembled so violently, I had to grip the hospital blanket to steady them. I could hear the monitor beside me speed up, beep beep beep, like it was echoing my pulse, warning the room that something was breaking inside me. I wasn't just recovering from brain surgery anymore. I was unraveling. The letter went on. My name is Lillian Monroe. We were married 9 years ago. If you're reading this, it means Nathan has done to you what he did to me, abandoned you when you needed him most. Every word burrowed deeper into my chest, carving out space for a pain that wasn't physical. This pain was betrayal wrapped in hindsight. It was 6 years of justifying his coldness, rewriting his absence as dedication, swallowing down the loneliness like medicine that never worked. I kept reading. When I got sick, it started slowly. Headaches. Dizziness. He told me I was overreacting. His mother said I was dramatic. But I wasn't. I had an arteriovenous malformation in my brain, a ticking time bomb. Just like you. I clutched the sheets tighter. My brain, still recovering from its own betrayal, pulsed with white heat. How could this be real? I collapsed while cooking dinner for him, chicken marsala, his favorite. He didn't answer my calls. He was at a client dinner. I was rushed into surgery and never woke up the same. Her story mirrored mine like some sick parallel universe. The only difference was the name of the dish. They called it a minimally conscious state. I was awake, technically. I could hear, sometimes even understand. But I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. I was trapped. I felt sick. Nathan came 3 times in 4 years. Once to sign over our joint accounts. Once to move me to a cheaper facility. And once, after he filed for divorce, to say goodbye. The heart monitor shrieked again. A nurse poked her head in. Everything okay? I nodded. Lie number 1,000,000. She left, closing the door gently behind her. You probably don't remember, but we've met. He brought you to see me 2 months after you started dating. You were sweet to the nurses. Smiled at me like I was a stranger. You had no idea you were meeting your predecessor. I dropped the letter. My mouth went dry. I searched the crevices of my memory for the woman in the long-term care room with the soft brown hair and faraway eyes. I remembered the way Nathan squeezed my hand and said, "This is why I value life." Seeing her like this. I thought he was noble. Empathetic. No. He was auditioning me. Grooming me to step into her place. I picked the letter back up with shaking fingers. The day I woke up, 4 years and 4 months later, my first question was, where is he? The nurse told me he'd remarried. That he'd moved on. I found your name. Found your photo. And then I found Grace. That name jolted something loose. Grace Halstead is my best friend. She was my maid of honor. She never gave up on me. She visited every single week while I was trapped inside myself. And when I woke up, she made me a promise that he would never do this to another woman. My stomach twisted. Grace is a corporate attorney. Brilliant. Strategic. And devastatingly effective. 3 months ago, she met Nathan at an art gallery downtown. They talked about wine, business, life. He flirted. She listened. He thought he discovered someone new. But he was walking into his own undoing. I put the letter down and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't just betrayal. This was strategy. Justice. A slow, careful dismantling of a man who built his life on exploiting the trust of women he thought were disposable. I should have been furious. I should have been screaming. Instead, I felt something cold and focused start to settle inside me. I wasn't alone in this. I was part of something bigger now, a story written long before I realized I'd stepped into it. The next morning, the nurse returned with a discharge form and instructions. Take it easy. No stress, she said with a sympathetic smile. If only she knew. Tucked beneath the stack of forms was a small card. Café Luna. 2 p.m. Today. No name, no signature, just an address and a time. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I called a car. Café Luna was a quiet little place tucked between a used bookstore and a nail salon. When I stepped inside, my heart jumped into my throat. She was already there. Grace Halstead. I knew it was her the moment I saw her, elegant, composed, effortlessly intimidating. She looked up from her cappuccino, gave a small smile, and gestured to the chair across from her. Hi, Aubrey, she said, like we were old friends. I sat down slowly. My incision ached as I leaned forward. How do you know Lillian? I asked. Her expression softened. She's family, really. We went to law school together. I'm the one who found her when she collapsed. And I was there when she woke up. I swallowed the lump in my throat. She asked me to watch you, Grace continued. Because we knew it would happen again. It was only a matter of time before Nathan repeated the pattern. You were dating him? I whispered. She nodded, eyes sharp. He thought he found a mistress. Really, he found a lawyer with power of attorney over all his assets. I choked on a laugh. You're kidding. Grace reached into her purse and slid a document across the table. Nope. Signed and notarized. He gave me full access. Believed I was helping him protect his investments. He handed me the keys to his empire thinking I was the fire escape. I opened my phone. My bank account now showed a balance of $247,000. He doesn't know, Grace said. That money? From Lillian. Her insurance settlement. She never spent a dime. Told me to give it to the next woman who survived him. My hand shook. My phone buzzed. Nathan. Incoming call. Grace raised an eyebrow. You ready? I answered and put him on speaker. Aubrey, Nathan's voice was tight. Where are you? Something's wrong with the accounts. I can't access anything. There's a legal hold. I know, I said calmly. What the hell is going on? I'm having coffee, I said, meeting Grace's eyes, with someone who finally showed up. Silence. Then, his voice shifted, cool, manipulative. I don't know what she's told you. But we need to talk. Alone. This doesn't concern anyone else. It concerns Lillian, I said. And me. And every woman you've treated like a placeholder. His breath caught. Lillian is alive, I cut him off. Very much alive. More silence. Then, finally, what do you want? I took a breath. My voice was steady. Nothing, Nathan. I want nothing from you. Not your apologies. Not your assets. Not even your name. You can't just walk away. I'm not walking away, I said. I'm burning the bridge behind me. Then I hung up. Blocked his number. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Grace slid the phone across the table with a finality that felt like a gavel strike. He won't be able to reach you again, she said. Everything's blocked. All access revoked. I nodded slowly, still staring at my banking app like the numbers would rearrange themselves into something I understood. $247,000. That wasn't just money. That was a lifeline. A message. A revolution signed in zeros from a woman who'd risen from the dead. He's going to spiral, Grace continued, folding her hands. He always does when control slips. You probably saw it in small ways before, the way he handled disappointment, how he reacted when you had needs that didn't benefit him. I had. The time I had the flu and asked him to pick up soup on his way home. He brought Thai food, spicy, oily, exactly the opposite of what I'd requested. It's good for your sinuses, he said flatly. I'd eaten it anyway, thanking him like it was some grand favor. That's how low the bar had gotten. I pushed the phone away and met Grace's eyes. Why me? Grace smiled gently. Because he always picks the same kind of woman. Kind. Capable. Intelligent, but not confrontational. The kind who will bend until she breaks. Or, until she wakes up. I leaned back in the chair. My body was still sore, still healing. But somewhere under the fog of surgery and sedation, I felt something anchor inside me. A new core being forged, steel, not glass. Lillian wants to meet you, Grace said. The words landed like a stone dropped into a still pond. Ripples moved through my chest, my throat, my hands. She's alive, I whispered, more to myself than to her. She's stronger than ever. 20 minutes later, we pulled up to a quiet townhouse nestled in a tree-lined street that looked like it belonged in a Hallmark movie. Ivy crawled up the brick. Lavender bloomed along the porch. It didn't look like the kind of place where someone planned a man's destruction. It looked like peace. And maybe that's what real revenge looks like, peace earned the hard way. Grace didn't knock. She just opened the door and stepped inside. I followed her into a home that smelled like cinnamon and clean linen. The furniture was warm-toned, mismatched in a charming way. A large painting of a forest hung above the fireplace. Books lined the walls like insulation. Then I saw her. Lillian Monroe stood at the end of the hallway, barefoot on hardwood, wearing jeans and a navy sweater. She was older than in the photo, of course. But only in the way women age when they've fought through hell and come back sharper. There was something timeless in her eyes, resilience carved into bone. Aubrey, she said, and her voice was soft. I'm so glad you're okay. I didn't know what to say. What do you say to someone whose life your husband tried to erase? But she didn't wait. She stepped forward and pulled me into a hug. I've been where you are, she said into my hair. You're not crazy. You're not weak. And this wasn't your fault. We sat down in her sunlit dining room where soup and bread waited, still warm. Lillian poured tea into delicate ceramic mugs, her hand steady as if this was just another Tuesday. I thought you were dead, I said finally, unable to keep the awe from my voice. Everyone did, she said, smiling wryly. Especially Nathan. Which made it very easy for him to move on. Or so he thought. I stared at her, then at Grace. How did you do it? All of this? Lillian and Grace exchanged a glance. Grace answered first. We didn't rush. That was key. This wasn't about revenge, it was about making sure he could never do it again. Not to you. Not to anyone. Lillian nodded. After I woke up, I had no money. No home. Everything was gone. Grace took me in, helped me get back on my feet. But we knew we couldn't confront him directly, not without evidence, not without leverage. So, we watched. We waited. I blinked. Waited for what? For him to pick his next victim, Lillian said. We didn't know who it would be. But we knew she'd look a lot like me. I swallowed. That burned. It was true. He took you to the same honeymoon resort, Lillian continued. Used the same florist. Even gave you a ring nearly identical to mine. He's a creature of habit. Just assumes women are interchangeable. He actually introduced me to you, I said quietly, the memory clawing its way back. In the care facility. He said seeing you like that made him value life more. Lillian let out a bitter laugh. He used my coma as a character-building anecdote. Classy. They walked me through the timeline. Grace, attending art galleries and fundraisers Nathan frequented. Nathan, predictably charmed by her cool intelligence and new-to-town backstory. Flirting turned to dinners. Dinners turned to confessions. Confessions turned to paperwork. He wanted to protect his assets, in case his wife became a financial liability. He didn't even see it coming, Grace said, pulling out a folder. He signed every document. Voluntarily. I even suggested a clause in case of emergency medical decisions. He loved that. Why? I asked. Why didn't you just confront him? Expose him? Lillian reached across the table and took my hand. Because people like Nathan don't respond to confrontation. They respond to consequence. Public humiliation? He'd spin it. Legal action? He'd stall. But pull the rug out from under him? Take away the money, the control, the legacy? That's how you make him crumble. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of signatures and notarized documents. I now owned the house Nathan and I had lived in. Lillian reclaimed her share of the portfolio he'd built during their marriage. Grace transferred every account he'd once hidden offshore back into the light. It felt surreal, like dismantling a kingdom, brick by brick, with 3 cups of tea and a clipboard. Grace checked her phone and smirked. He's already been fired. Turns out charging company expenses for hotel rooms and jewelry for your mistress/lawyer is frowned upon. His mother? I asked. Hasn't returned a call since she found out Lillian was alive. People like Helen don't support weakness. And right now, Nathan's swimming in it. Before I left, Lillian handed me one last envelope. This one smaller. Thinner. Legal looking. A restraining order, she said. Already filed. All you need to do is sign. I did. With a flourish. As Grace drove me home, the sun began to set, casting gold across the dashboard. I sat in silence, absorbing it all. I wasn't the same woman who'd collapsed on a garage floor less than a week ago. That woman was gone. What remained was tempered steel. Sharpened by betrayal. Forged in quiet fury. I turned to Grace. What happens now? She smiled. Now? You heal. You rebuild. And when you're ready, you help the next one. Back in my driveway, I stood staring at the house I'd once shared with a man I thought loved me. Now, it was mine. Really mine. Purchased with heartbreak. Paid for with years of silence and one hell of a comeback. And inside me, I felt something flicker to life. Not revenge. Not rage. Hope. I used to believe that justice looked like a courtroom, gavel strikes, confessions under pressure, a neat little bow of accountability. But real justice? The kind that seeps into bones and rebalances the scales? It's quieter than that. Sometimes, it looks like a man screaming into a phone that's already been blocked. Nathan called 34 times in 2 days. Left 8 voicemails. Sent 16 texts that ranged from pleading to threatening and then back to begging. I didn't listen to a single message. I just watched the notifications pile up like a digital funeral pyre, each ping a nail in the coffin of his control. He knew. He knew he'd lost. Still, that didn't mean he'd go down quietly. The first real consequence hit fast. Grace sent me the update 2 days after our meeting at Lillian's. Nathan had been officially terminated from his firm. Misuse of corporate funds. Internal audit confirmed that he'd expensed nearly $12,000 in client entertainment over 3 months, all of it tied to Grace. Hotel suites. Dinners. Jewelry. Champagne. Art. The board wasn't impressed. He tried to explain, apparently. Said she was a prospect. A lead. A strategic opportunity. But they'd seen the surveillance footage. The hand-holding. The long dinners. The fake meetings that never appeared on any company agenda. Nathan Prescott had built his career on smooth lies. But in the end, it was his own vanity that destroyed him. That, and a woman in a black dress who knew the law better than he did. A week after that, his condo downtown, paid for with what was supposed to be my life insurance payout, was gone. The bank had seized the property after the frozen accounts triggered a default on the mortgage. One of Grace's contacts in real estate confirmed he'd moved into a rental apartment near the outskirts of the city. Aubrey from 6 months ago might have driven by to see it. She would have wanted to witness the fall. That version of me needed proof. But I didn't. Because the point wasn't to humiliate Nathan. The point was to set me free. And still, somehow, freedom felt complicated. There were moments, late at night, when I'd sit in the living room, the one I used to scrub down before his client friends visited, and stare at the walls, half expecting him to walk in. Not because I wanted him to. But because my nervous system hadn't caught up with the truth. I'd flinch when the phone rang. Check the driveway reflexively. I wasn't afraid of Nathan, not physically. I was afraid of the ghost he'd become. The version of him that still whispered in my head, "You're overreacting. You're too sensitive. You'll never make it without me." He hadn't just broken my heart. He'd bent reality around his indifference until I questioned whether I deserved basic care. The healing wasn't just in court filings and property deeds. It was in unlearning him. Lillian texted me one morning, "Ready to do something brave?" I replied, "Define brave." She sent back a time and address. That afternoon, I pulled up to a brick office building tucked behind a row of cypress trees. Inside, Grace greeted me at the door with her usual cool composure, but this time her smile was softer. Lillian stood at the window, watching the street below like a sentry. "What is this?" I asked. Grace handed me a manila folder. "We're registering a nonprofit." I blinked. "We're what?" "The Whitmore Foundation," Lillian said, turning to face me. "Named after the last name he tried to bury me under." "We're taking it back." The foundation would provide legal assistance, emergency funds, and shelter support to women caught in toxic marriages, especially those isolated or financially controlled. Women like me. Like her. Like too many. "You don't have to say yes," Grace said. "But we thought you might want to do something with all that fury." I laughed, and it startled all of us. Fury, I said. Feels like the first emotion I actually trust. The next few weeks moved quickly. Paperwork. Branding. Legal filings. Lillian handled the outreach. Grace built the legal framework. And I, surprisingly, found my footing in storytelling. We created an anonymous blog, the Wake Up Files, where survivors could share their stories without shame, without judgment. The first post was mine. A blow-by-blow of how I'd confused neglect for nuance. How I'd turned excuses into absolution. How I'd almost died trying to be lovable to a man who was never capable of love. The blog exploded. Women from all over the country emailed, commented, messaged. Some had left. Some hadn't. Some were still bleeding quietly, in rooms no one else entered. And I told every single one of them the truth: you are not crazy. You are not difficult. You are not too much. You were just too much for someone who wanted you small. Nathan, meanwhile, went eerily quiet. According to Grace, he'd tried to hire a lawyer, but the retainer check bounced. He'd tried to file a counterclaim for emotional distress. The court rejected it. He'd tried to call Grace, once. She answered on speaker in the office. I hope you're proud of yourselves, he snarled. Not yet, she replied. But give it time. Click. One afternoon, I found myself back at Café Luna, sitting in the same seat where I'd first heard Grace say Lillian's name. Only now, the air didn't feel charged with panic. It felt clear. Across from me, Lillian sipped her chai latte with both hands wrapped around the mug. You look taller, she said. I think it's just the lack of shame, I replied. We laughed. Real, full-bellied laughter. The kind that makes strangers glance over. Do you ever wish you could make him feel what we felt? I asked. Lillian considered that for a long moment. I used to. I used to dream about it. But then I realized, I don't want to live in the same emotional currency he used on me. If I have to become him to beat him, I've already lost. I nodded. I wasn't there yet, but I was closer than I'd ever been. 6 months after the foundation launched, we got our first major grant. An anonymous donor, impressed by our mission, wrote us a check with 6 figures and a sticky note that read, "For the women who stopped waiting to be rescued." I cried when I read it. Ugly cried. The kind of sobbing that shakes loose things you didn't even know were stuck. That night, I drove past the gas station where Nathan now worked the night shift. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to see him bagging chips and avoiding eye contact. But I did watch from across the lot as he refilled the windshield washer bins. His shoulders were hunched. His hair had thinned. His arrogance had curdled into something smaller. He looked ordinary. It hit me then. He was never powerful. Just protected by my silence. And now? Now I was the one who had the mic. Part 5. I watched him fall apart and felt nothing. I watched him crawl to the ATM in the pouring rain, punching buttons with frantic fingers, hoping, begging, that maybe, this time, the machine would give him something. A receipt spit out. Declined. Again. He stared at the slip like it had betrayed him. Like the money was still his, just hiding. From across the street, I stood under an awning, dry and calm, sipping coffee that wasn't cheap and didn't taste like shame. I didn't feel sorry. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel much of anything at all. And maybe that was the point. Maybe true closure isn't rage or revenge or some fireworks display of justice. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's watching the man who tried to erase you crumble, and not needing to cheer. The fall of Nathan Prescott wasn't a single explosion. It was 1,000 tiny implosions, silent, sudden, absolute. His world didn't collapse in front of CNN cameras or a screaming courtroom. It collapsed in quiet rooms, bank offices, HR meetings, court clerk counters. Where signatures mattered more than feelings. His assets were gone. His reputation? ruined. His mother, Helen, the same woman who told me wives need to suffer silently, cut ties once Lillian came back into the picture. "I can't be seen with that mess," she reportedly told a neighbor. The Prescott name, once slick and shiny, now sounded like a warning. When Grace told me his landlord was suing him for back rent, I barely blinked. When she said his car got repossessed in the middle of his night shift, I nodded. But that moment at the ATM, alone, soaked, empty, that was when it really hit me. He built his kingdom on women like us. And it finally collapsed under the weight of our silence breaking. Lillian called me later that night. "How'd it feel?" she asked. I paused, then answered honestly. "Like I finally exhaled after holding my breath for 6 years." "You're free now," she said softly. "Yeah," I whispered, staring out the window at a world that somehow looked brighter. "We both are." Freedom didn't mean forgetting. It meant remembering without drowning. I still had flashbacks, of the garage floor, of the silence in room 508, of the cold text he sent while I was dying. Sometimes, I'd find myself pausing mid-sentence because a memory slammed into me like a truck. But now, I didn't shove it down. Now, I let it surface, breathe, float away. I started therapy. Real therapy. Not the kind where you talk around the pain. The kind where you sit in it, scream in it, bleed in it until it starts scarring over. I told my story publicly. Not just through the wake-up files but on a podcast with over 100K listeners. I shook while speaking. My voice cracked. But I didn't stop. Grace stood next to me in every interview, cool as ever. Lillian listened from backstage, eyes full of fire and softness. We weren't just telling our story. We were holding a mirror up to every woman still stuck inside a story like ours. The Whitmore Foundation exploded in growth. By our first anniversary, we had 10 legal partners, 3 shelters under contract, and nearly 1,000 women in our recovery network. Some called it a revolution. Others called it revenge. We called it a beginning. One afternoon, I got a letter. No return address. No signature. Just my name, in handwriting I once memorized. Inside was a single sentence. "You've taken everything from me." I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote back on the same paper. "You gave it away." I never mailed it. I didn't need to. The act of writing it was enough. 6 months later, Lillian held a dinner for the founding women of the foundation. There were 12 of us. Different races, ages, hometowns, but all survivors of men who mistook silence for surrender. She stood to speak after dessert. Her voice was calm, unwavering. "I used to think surviving was enough," she said. "But survival is just step 1. The real goal is to live, without flinching, without shrinking, without waiting for someone to come home who never truly saw you." I raised my glass to that. We all did. Eventually, I changed my last name back. Not to my maiden name. To something entirely new. Something that had no history of being attached to a man who abandoned women in hospital rooms. I moved cities. Bought a new place near the water. Quiet. Safe. Mine. And I started dating again. Carefully. No fairy tales. No, he completes me. Just real conversations. Real boundaries. Real respect. I still carry the scars, physical and emotional. But now, I see them as reminders, not defects. Badges, not burdens. And Nathan? Last I heard, he took a job at a storage facility. Cash only. No benefits. Just enough to scrape by. He drinks too much, smokes now. And nobody says his name like it means anything anymore. He tried to file a defamation suit against the foundation. The court threw it out in under 15 minutes. Sometimes I wonder, what was his moment? The moment he realized he couldn't talk or charm or lie his way out of this one? Was it when Grace pulled the financial rug out from under him? Was it when he saw my name on the deed to the house he once threatened to kick me out of? Or was it something smaller? Like that ATM in the rain. Alone. Powerless. Empty. So, here I am. Still here. Still rising. Still unlearning every lie I was ever told about what I deserved and what love should feel like. And here's where I ask you. If someone showed you who they were the first time, would you believe them? Or would you wait? Bleed? Doubt yourself? Shrink so small you forgot the sound of your own voice? I did. Until I didn't. Until I chose to stop surviving quietly and start living loudly. And if this story is anything to you, let it be this. You are not alone. You are not crazy. And silence isn't strength when it's protecting the wrong person. Break it. Burn the bridge. And walk into the fire like it was made for you. Because maybe, just maybe, it was.